On the morning of October 6, 2016, a quiet apartment in Goa stopped answering the door. What the police found inside would shock the entire state. Welcome to the inner room, and this is the story of Monika Ghurde, a woman later known in the media as the Perfume Girl. Goa, not the postcard version, not just the beaches, not just the nightlife or music or the stories people tell when they return home, but the lived in Goa, the Goa of quiet mornings, of families that have lived on the same soil for generations, of new residents who arrive and are folded gently into the community, the Goa of tree-lined lanes, of old homes standing beside new buildings, of neighbors who greet each other in passing, of different cultures, languages, and histories existing side by side, peacefully. It is layered, it is rooted, it is welcoming, and it is deeply community-oriented. In places like Sangolda, life moves gently. Residential complexes, security gates, balconies with plants, and morning walks. Evening lights flickering on at the same hour each day. It is the kind of place where safety feels ordinary, where routine feels dependable. And perhaps that is why, when something violent happens in such a space, it doesn't feel like a breakdown of a place. It feels like an interruption of peace. And in one such quiet residential pocket of Sangolda lived a woman whose life revolved around something most of us barely pause to notice: scent. Monika was a 39-year-old photographer turned perfumer. She was a fragrance specialist, one of the few in India trained deeply in the science and art of perfumery. In a country where careers often follow predictable lanes, engineering, medicine, law, business, she chose something rare. She chose smell. Not as a hobby, not as indulgence, but as expertise. She understood how scent shapes memory, how a single note can transport you to childhood, how fragrance can calm, seduce, energize, or comfort. She trained internationally, worked with global fragrance houses, returned to India with knowledge that very few possessed. She was often referred to as the First Lady of Smell. But even that title feels insufficient, because what she really represented was independence. A woman living alone, building her career, occupying space confidently, unapologetically self-made. In a quiet apartment in Sangolda, behind secure gates, within a functioning residential complex, she had built a life that felt stable, structured, private, and safe. Safe. Or at least it felt that way. Because safety is often not the absence of danger. It is the absence of anticipation. There were no alarms that week. No visible signs of threat. No public warnings. Just routine. Until the morning of October 6, 2016, when that routine stopped responding, her domestic help arrived, as she did every day. She rang the bell. No answer. She tried again. Still no response. Concerned, she called Monika's brother in Mumbai. He tried calling her. The phone rang. But she did not pick up. Worry turned into urgency. He contacted a neighbor who had a duplicate key to the apartment. When the door was opened, the ordinary morning ended. Monika Ghurde was found dead inside her rented flat in Sangolda. The 39-year-old photographer turned perfumer lay on her bed. Her body was found naked. Her hands were tied to the back of it. The room showed signs of struggle. The life that had felt structured and self-contained had been violently interrupted. The police were called, and what began as a silent concern became a criminal investigation. This was not a random break-in by someone unfamiliar with the space. There were no signs of chaotic ransacking. This was someone who knew the complex, who understood entry points, who understood her routine. Investigators soon realized another complication. The residential complex did not have CCTV cameras installed at the time. There were no surveillance recordings to review, no visual trail of entry or exit. With no signs of forced entry and no footage to analyze, investigators began to consider a different possibility. This may not have been the act of a stranger. It may have been someone known. In the early stages of the investigation, suspicion briefly extended to individuals within her personal circle, including her former husband. He was questioned, but nothing emerged to connect him to the crime. The focus shifted again. There were missing valuables. Her ATM card was gone. Her phone was missing, which meant one thing. Whoever entered did not just intend to harm. He intended to benefit. Within hours, financial transactions began to speak. An ATM withdrawal was captured on CCTV. A figure stood calmly at a machine in Porvorim, using her card, entering her PIN. Not rushed, not frantic. As if the fear belonged only to the victim. Simultaneously, technical teams traced the movement of her stolen phone. Signals do not lie. Devices move. Networks record. Locations narrow. The map began to tighten, step by step, frame by frame, signal by signal. And within 3 days, an arrest was made, not in Goa, but in Bengaluru. The man in custody was 21 years old young. Once positioned at the very gate meant to provide security, his name was Rajkumar Singh. He had worked as a security guard in the same residential complex where Monika lived. He had been dismissed from his job after an umbrella belonging to Monika was found in his possession. The incident led to a complaint, and he was terminated. An umbrella, a small object, a small act of accountability. But humiliation does not measure itself in the size of the object. It measures itself in the size of the ego that absorbs it. For a young man in uniform, stationed at a gate, visibility is identity. Authority becomes self-worth. And when Monika accused him, she exercised her right. But in his mind, something shifted. Being corrected by a woman who lived alone, who was financially independent, who did not appear to need protection, especially when the correction cost him his job. The firing was procedural, but resentment is emotional. And investigators would later learn resentment had been building. Not sudden rage, not impulsive anger, but grievance. After being dismissed, Rajkumar Singh left the state and worked briefly in different cities, taking up labor jobs. But departure did not mean detachment. At some point, he returned to Goa, not for employment, but with purpose. He went back to the same residential complex, The same gates, the same building, the same apartment where Monika lived. When he arrived, her car was not in the parking area. He waited. Concerned about being noticed within the compound, he moved to the terrace of the residential building. And there he remained for several days, hidden in plain sight. From that vantage point, he observed routines. He studied movements. He watched when residents returned home. He noted when corridors became empty. He learned when lights switched on and off. He waited. This was not impulsive anger. This was preparation. Not humiliation reacting, but humiliation planning. He was not wandering. He was rehearsing intrusion. And when he finally saw her car parked below, he came down. On the night of October 5, 2016, leading into the early hours of October 6, he entered Monika's apartment. This was not a forced break-in in the traditional sense of breaking doors or windows. He used his familiarity with the building and access knowledge to enter the premises. He was armed with a knife. Inside the apartment, he overpowered her. He tied her hands and legs to the bed. He demanded money. He forced her to reveal her ATM PIN. According to police accounts, he moved around her home calmly. He went into the kitchen. He ate food from her refrigerator. Eggs, chocolate, ice cream. This detail is disturbing, not because of what was eaten, but because of the comfort it implies. This was not panic. This was control. Investigators further stated that he forced her to watch explicit material. The assault that followed was violent and deliberate. At some point, he even shaved. He recorded a video of her, allegedly to threaten and silence her. The violence was prolonged, and eventually he strangled her. The autopsy later confirmed death due to asphyxia. After killing her, he did not immediately flee the country or disappear underground. Instead, he used her ATM card. Over the next few days, he withdrew money. He was effectively living off her funds. CCTV cameras captured him using the ATM in Porvorim. He appeared composed, not hurried, not visibly distressed. Meanwhile, police were tracing the financial transactions. They were tracking the movement of her stolen phone. The net was tightening. Within 3 days of leaving Goa, he travelled to Bengaluru. On October 9, 2016, he was arrested. After being caught, a video circulated showing him in custody, surrounded by people wearing civilian clothes. In that clip, widely aired by national media channels, he can be heard admitting to the murder. There was no visible panic, no dramatic resistance, just a statement, a flat acknowledgement of what he had done. Rajkumar Singh was charged with murder, rape, and robbery. The case moved to Mapsa Sessions Court. What had been solved swiftly at the investigative level now entered the slower machinery of the judicial system. And there it stalled. Years passed. For the public, the shock began to fade. For the system, it became a file, a numbered case, a sequence of hearings, a procedural matter moving through dates and adjournments. But for those who knew her, it never became paperwork. As of late 2022, the trial had not reached sentencing. In January 2022, the court was informed that Singh was displaying abnormal behavior and required psychiatric evaluation. A mental health review board later assessed him. On October 13, 2022, he was declared fit to stand trial. But within weeks, by November 2022, reports emerged again of irregular behavior. The proceedings were delayed once more. The legal question became layered. Was this genuine mental instability or strategic stalling? The court system must proceed cautiously in such matters. Mental health cannot be dismissed, but neither can justice be indefinitely postponed. And so, the case remains suspended in procedural uncertainty. As of the latest publicly available reports through 2026, there have been no further official updates regarding the final conclusion or sentencing in the case. No confirmed reports of a completed trial. No publicly documented conviction. The proceedings, at least in the public record, appear to have remained unresolved. For the public, that absence of update can feel like silence. For her family, however, silence does not equal closure. It simply extends the wait. It did not become a file. It remained a call no family prepares for. Her brother traveled to Goa. Formalities followed. Post-mortem procedures, documentation, identification. The rituals that accompany sudden death are procedural. But grief is not. For them, this was not a case. It was Monika, a daughter, a sister, a presence that would never return home. There is something deeply unsettling about crimes like these. Not because they happen in one city or another. Not because they occur in residential spaces. But because they expose a fragile truth. Safety is structural, but vulnerability is human. Gated complexes, security guards, access cards, CCTV cameras, all of it creates the architecture of protection. But protection fails when the threat understands the architecture. This was not an outsider forcing entry into chaos. This was proximity, familiarity, access, and beneath that, entitlement. When accountability is perceived as insult, when correction is interpreted as humiliation, when independence is mistaken for arrogance, violence can begin long before the act itself. It begins in thought. It begins in grievance. It begins in the quiet rehearsal of, I deserve to reclaim power. And that rehearsal, left unchecked, can escalate. Monika's life represented something powerful. A woman alone, not lonely. Independent, not vulnerable. Successful, not apologetic. And that, for some fragile egos, can feel threatening. Monika understood scent. She understood how invisible molecules can linger in a room long after someone has left. How fragrance can outlast presence. How breath carries memory. And perhaps that is the quiet metaphor that remains. A life ended by suffocation. A career built around inhalation. An interruption of breath. But peace? True peace is not defined by the absence of tragedy. It is defined by how communities continue. Goa did not change that day. Its morning still arrived. Its lights still flickered on. Its neighbors still greeted each other. But somewhere within that rhythm, a life of quiet mastery was silenced. And in the inner room, we do not remember her as a victim. We remember her as a woman who chose mastery over convention, whose independence was not rebellion, but discipline, whose life was structured, private, safe, until it wasn't. And sometimes, the most haunting thing about violence is not how loudly it arrives, but how quietly it waits.